The thing about corporate America? They'll stab you in the back with a smile and then hand you the knife as proof it was yours. That's exactly what happened to me, except I wasn't supposed to survive it. It started on a Tuesday morning, the kind where the city's noise felt like static in my ears. I walked into the 37th floor of Lark and Winslow Consulting with a coffee in hand, ready to grind through another day of corporate politics disguised as teamwork. The air was thick with the usual mix of burnt espresso, stale perfume, and something less tangible tension. I felt the eyes before I saw them. Coworkers glanced up from their desks, then quickly away, like they'd been caught peeking into a crime scene. That was my first sign something was wrong. My second was when Richard Halford, the senior project manager, a man whose skin was as pale as his morals, walked toward me with that smile. "Marcus," he said, loud enough for nearby ears to catch. "We need to talk. My office. Now." I followed him in silence, the click of my shoes against the marble floor echoing like a countdown. His office was a sterile box of glass and steel, a place designed to make people feel small. He shut the door, sat down, and slid a manila folder across the desk toward me. Inside were printouts, financial reports, client invoices, and a neatly compiled spreadsheet, all with my name on them, all showing discrepancies. "I'm sure you understand how serious this is," Richard said, steepling his fingers like a TV villain. "The client found irregularities. Missing funds. I wanted to give you a chance to explain yourself before HR gets involved." My pulse spiked. "This isn't mine," I said, pushing the papers back toward him. "Those reports are fake." He leaned back, eyes glinting. "Marcus, you've been here less than a year. You've done good work, but these kinds of mistakes make it hard for us to keep you. And frankly, in a company like this, your background already makes some people nervous." There it was. Not even subtle. I felt my jaw tighten. I knew exactly what this was. Richard was setting me up. But what he didn't know? I wasn't the kind of person you could frame and expect to walk away unscathed. 2 hours later, I sat at my desk, my mind a storm of calculations. I'd worked too hard, paid my dues in late nights, double shifts, and swallowing corporate microaggressions to let this man destroy me. But if I went after him without proof, I'd be the angry black man stereotype before I could blink. So I waited. Over the next week, I noticed small things. Richard always left his office door open when he spoke with certain people. His emails had patterns, phrases he repeated when he was lying. I started documenting everything. Screen captures, voice memos, even casual conversations accidentally recorded on my phone. The thing about predators like Richard, they think they're untouchable. That arrogance makes them sloppy. Friday came, and with it, the quarterly staff meeting, a big, showy production in the glass conference room overlooking Manhattan. Richard took the floor, his voice syrupy as he thanked everyone for their dedication in challenging times. Then he looked at me. "Unfortunately," he announced, "we've discovered significant financial misconduct by one of our own. Marcus here has been lying," I said, cutting him off. The room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. I stood up, pulled a small USB stick from my pocket, and plugged it into the conference room screen. "Before you finish that sentence, Richard, I think everyone should hear this." And then his voice played for all to hear. "We'll put it on Marcus's account. No one will question it. HR already has their doubts about him." Gasps. Whispers. Eyes shifting. I let the recording play in full. Richard's detailed plan to fabricate evidence, plant it in my files, and use me as a scapegoat to cover his own embezzlement. When it ended, Richard's face was the color of old paper. "Security," the CEO said flatly. 2 men in suits stepped forward, taking him by the arms. As they led him away, he looked at Minute with guilt, but with hatred. And I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I'd shown every single person in that room exactly who he was. I knew it wouldn't erase the quiet prejudice I faced every day here. But that day, I proved something bigger: that silence was the accomplice of injustice, and I refused to be either. The applause never came. It wasn't that kind of victory. When Richard was dragged out of the conference room, the silence he left behind wasn't relief, it was fear. I could see it in my colleagues' eyes. If they can do that to him, what will they do to us? The CEO cleared his throat, forcing a strained smile. "Well, that's certainly not how I intended to start this meeting. Let's take a short break." People scattered. Some shot me cautious glances. Others avoided my eyes altogether. A few mouthed "nice job" as they passed, but no one lingered. Nobody wanted to be seen standing next to the guy who'd just taken down a senior manager for racism and fraud. Back at my desk, my inbox was already lighting up like a Christmas tree. HR, legal, IT security, even a cryptic "call me" from someone in accounting I barely knew. But the one email that made my stomach knot came from Samantha Rhodes, the VP of Operations, Richard's mentor, and one of the most influential people in the company. "Marcus, I'd like to speak with you privately this afternoon. My office. For PM. I'd been here long enough to know, when a VP invites you, it's not a request." At 4 sharp, I stepped into Samantha's office. She sat behind an oak desk, sunlight spilling over her like she was carved out of authority itself. Early 60s, silver hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, and eyes that could read a man's life story in 3 seconds flat. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her. I did. "You embarrassed this company today, Marcus." I met her gaze. I exposed a crime. Her lips curved not quite a smile. "That's one way to put it. Another way is, you made us look weak, disorganized, vulnerable. Clients don't like vulnerability." I felt heat rising in my chest. "With respect, ma'am, maybe clients wouldn't like knowing their money was being stolen by someone in management." She leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Richard was a problem. But you didn't just take him down, you took down a network. People who've been here decades. People who protect each other. And now they see you as a threat." "Good," I said. Her eyes softened, just slightly. "I'm not warning you because I think you can't handle it. I'm warning you because they won't play fair. And the next time, they won't leave a paper trail for you to find." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, but because I could feel the shape of something bigger forming around me. Richard wasn't just some rogue operator. He was part of a machine. And the machine didn't stop just because one gear got pulled out. Monday morning, the retaliation began. First, my access to certain internal files disappeared. "Technical glitch," IT said. Then, meeting invites stopped showing up on my calendar until I'd get an email asking why I wasn't there. My workload doubled overnight, with urgent assignments landing on my desk minutes before I was supposed to leave. It was textbook corporate warfare. Bury the target in busy work, isolate them, make them slip. But I'd grown up fighting for every inch of space I stood on, and I wasn't going to slip. I kept a private log of every coincidence, every mysterious deletion, every snide comment in the break room that danced on the edge of HR complaint-worthy. And then something strange happened. One afternoon, a sticky note appeared on my desk. No name, just a short message. "They're meeting after hours in conference 12. Bring your phone." I stared at it for a long moment. It could have been a trap, but something in my gut told me to go. At 7:15 p.m., when most of the floor was empty, I made my way to conference 12. The door was cracked just enough for me to hear voices. "Can't believe he's still here," a man's voice said. "That's what happens when you give them too much leeway," a woman replied. Her tone dripped with contempt. "He's making us look bad. We need to encourage him to resign." Or, another voice said, "We make sure he doesn't have a choice." My skin went cold. I hit record on my phone. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. The recording wasn't enough to prove a legal conspiracy, but it was damning. It showed intent. It showed racial bias. And in the right hands, it could blow this wide open. But whose hands could I trust? That's when I remembered the woman from accounting, Janelle Price. She'd emailed me once about a suspicious transaction in a client file Richard handled. I'd brushed it off at the time, thinking she was just fishing for gossip. I called her the next morning. "I was wondering when you'd reach out," she said, her voice low. "Meet me at the cafe across from the building. Lunch break." When we met, she slid into the booth with a tote bag that looked way too heavy for a lunch date. Inside, documents. Lots of them. "Richard wasn't the only one stealing," she said. "There's a whole ring. Money siphoned through fake vendors, split between certain execs. Samantha knows about Ethel. She might even be part of it." The weight in my stomach sank deeper. This wasn't about me anymore. This was systemic. "And you're telling me this because?" I asked. "Because you've already survived one shot. I think you might be the only one stubborn or stupid enough to take them all on." I walked back to the office with my mind racing. If Janelle was right, the whole culture here was rotten. And if I played this wrong, They'd bury me before the truth ever saw daylight. But there was one thing they didn't understand about me. I didn't just survive storms. I learned to dance in them. By Tuesday morning, I had a plan. Not a fully formed, foolproof one, more like a live grenade I intended to throw into the heart of Lark and Winslow and see who survived. The first step was building an army, small but loyal. Not the kind of people who would post justice for Marcus on LinkedIn and then go back to ignoring my emails. No, I needed people who had skin in the game. Janelle was the obvious first recruit. She already had documents. She already hated the system, and she knew how to read a ledger like it was a crime novel. The second was Ethan Yu, a junior IT analyst whose cubicle was strategically close to the network server room. I caught him once bypassing a firewall to download a pirated video game. He thought I was going to report him, but instead, I told him to be more careful next time. That favor had been accruing interest. The third was Clarissa Bennett, a quiet, middle-aged admin who seemed invisible to everyone except me. She was the kind of person who could overhear two executives plotting a coup while refilling the printer paper, and no one would think twice about her presence. We met in the back corner of a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office, far from the company Wi-Fi, and anyone who might accidentally join our Zoom call. Here's the situation, I began, spreading out a few photocopies of the documents Janelle had given me. This isn't just Richard. It's an organized network. Money laundering through fake vendors, inflated invoices, and bogus project budgets. And if we can follow the trail, we'll find out exactly who's in on it. Ethan leaned forward, eyes bright. I can pull server access logs, emails, file downloads, even deleted messages. But if they see me digging, I'm toast. That's where I come in, Clarissa said, her voice surprisingly firm. I handle Samantha's travel bookings. If she's meeting someone off-site to coordinate all this, I'll know. And I'll keep pulling financials, Janelle added. But we need to be smart. If they realize we're connected, they'll take us all out. I nodded. We move in shadows. We share nothing over company channels. And when we hit once hard enough they can't spin it. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked like ghosts. Ethan slipped into the server room under the pretense of routine maintenance, copying encrypted files onto a drive small enough to hide in his shoe. Clarissa tracked Samantha's movements, logging a series of client dinners that coincidentally lined up with bank transfers Janelle had flagged. Meanwhile, I played the role of the compliant, overworked employee. I took their extra assignments. I nodded when they criticized me. I laughed when they made jokes that weren't funny. All the while, I was tightening the noose. The break came from Ethan. He handed me a flash drive one night after everyone else had gone home. "Here's your smoking gun," he whispered. Inside were emails between Samantha and 3 other execs, discussing adjustments to project budgets complete with percentages that matched the skim amounts Janelle had tracked. One email even mentioned Richard by name, noting that Marcus will make a good fall guy if this goes sideways. I stared at the screen until my hands went cold. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was proof. The question was, how to use it. If I went straight to the CEO, he'd bury it to protect the company. HR was useless. They worked for the executives, not us. The police? Maybe, but they'd need airtight evidence, and even then, the company's lawyers would drown it in procedure. That left one option, the shareholders. Lark and Winslow was a publicly traded company. The annual shareholder meeting was 3 weeks away, a carefully scripted event where the board bragged about profits and handed out dividends. But under SEC regulations, any shareholder could submit evidence of fraud, and it had to be addressed publicly, which meant I needed to become a shareholder. The next day, I opened a brokerage account, scraped together what little savings I had, and bought a single share of Lark and Winslow stock. 1 share was all it took to earn the right to speak at that meeting. When I told the team, Janelle grinned. "You're insane." "Insane is trying to fight them from inside their own system," I said. "I'm about to use their system as a weapon." The next 3 weeks were a balancing act between corporate survival and covert sabotage. Every time I thought they might suspect something, I'd defuse it with fake compliance, volunteering for tedious work, asking harmless, clarifying questions in meetings, even laughing at Samantha's awful jokes. Meanwhile, the team kept gathering more. By the time the shareholder meeting rolled around, we had bank records linking fake vendors to personal accounts of 2 executives, email trails proving deliberate racial targeting and scapegoating plans, Audio of Richard admitting the scheme existed long before I arrived. It was enough to bury them. The meeting was held in a luxury hotel ballroom downtown, the kind with gold trim on the walls and chandeliers that looked like they cost more than my apartment building. I wore my sharpest suit and walked in like I belonged there. When they opened the floor for shareholder comments, my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Marcus Carter, I said into the microphone. Shareholder, I have evidence of systemic fraud, racial discrimination, and executive-level embezzlement within this company. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras swung toward me. I plugged a USB drive into the presentation system. Ethan had prepped the files so they opened instantly. One by one, the evidence appeared on the giant screen. The emails, the bank transfers, the recordings. This, I continued, my voice steady, is not a misunderstanding. It is not a clerical error. It is a criminal conspiracy, and it has operated under the protection of your senior management for years. The room erupted, some in outrage, some in panic. Samantha's face went pale. Two board members started whispering furiously to each other. And then security walked toward me. I thought they were going to drag me out. Instead, one of them leaned close and said, "We've been told to protect you. The board's calling an emergency session. Stay put." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. An hour later, Samantha and two other executives were escorted out of the building in full view of every shareholder, journalist, and camera in the room. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Because I knew the battle was won, but the war? The war against the kind of thinking that made this possible? That would take more than one victory. By the next morning, my name was everywhere. Not just in the company Slack channels, where half the staff was gossiping like high school kids, but in the New York Times, on CNN, and in 1,000 smaller news blogs that thrived on corporate scandals. Black employee blows whistle on racial discrimination and fraud at major firm. The headlines made me look like a hero. But walking into the office that day, I felt more like a man walking into a minefield. Some people avoided eye contact entirely. Others smiled too much, trying to convince me they'd been on my side the whole time. A few, the ones who'd been in that after-hours meeting in Conference 12, just stared, their faces a mix of fury and calculation. HR called me in before I'd even turned on my computer. They wanted statements, dates, and documentation, everything I'd already given to the SEC investigators who'd shown up the night before. "Marcus," the HR director said, her tone clipped, "this incident has caused significant disruption to the company. While we're grateful for your commitment to integrity, we also need to manage the perception among clients and employees." Perception? I repeated. "You mean you want to spin this so nobody has to admit what was going on?" She didn't answer. By Friday, Samantha and her co-conspirators were officially terminated for cause. The company released a statement praising its zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and unethical practices, conveniently leaving out that they'd tried to bury me alive until I fought back. My inbox overflowed with messages from strangers. Young Black professionals thanking me for showing it could be done. Former employees of Lark and Winslow sharing their own horror stories. Recruiters offering me jobs before I'd even had time to think about whether I wanted to stay in the industry. And yet, in the middle of all the congratulations, one message stood out. It was from my mother. "You did the right thing, baby. I'm proud of you. But remember, they'll try to take the win away from you if you let them." The following Monday, the CEO called me into his office. He was a tall man in an immaculate suit, the kind of executive who thought leadership meant having the most expensive pen in the room. "Marcus," he said, clasping his hands, "I want to thank you for your bravery. This company has been through a difficult time, but we're turning a corner. I'd like to offer you a promotion, senior project manager. A real chance to make a difference from within." I studied his face. He wasn't offering me this because he thought I deserved it. He was offering it because it made for a good headline. Whistleblower rewarded for courage. I thought of Samantha's warning on that first day that they wouldn't play fair next time. I thought of the co-workers who'd watched me fight for my life and done nothing. I thought of the quiet way racism could linger long after the overt villains had been escorted out. And I knew. 2 weeks later, I was gone. I left the promotion on the table, cashed out my unused vacation days, and took a job with a nonprofit that focused on workplace equity and whistleblower protection. It paid less. The office was smaller. The coffee was worse. But every day, I walked in knowing that my work meant something. Lark and Winslow survived, of course. Companies like that always do. They rebranded, hired a diversity consultant, plastered the website with smiling stock photos of inclusive teams. The shareholders were happy. The clients stayed. The machine kept running. But I had something they couldn't take back: the truth, and the proof that even in a rigged game, you could still play to win. 1 year later, I was invited to speak at a conference on corporate accountability. The room was full of people who'd been where I'd been, some who'd lost everything, others who were still in the fight. I told them what I wished someone had told me. You can't fix a rotten system from the inside if the rot goes all the way to the core. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away and build something better. And sometimes, you have to be willing to burn a bridge just to light the way for the next person. They clapped. But more importantly, they understood. After the talk, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 24, her voice shaking as she said, "I'm going through something like what you did. I don't know if I'm strong enough." I looked at her the way my mother had looked at me so many years ago, when I'd come home from school bloody-nosed and furious after my first real fight. "You're stronger than you think," I told her. "And they're not as untouchable as they look." That night, as I walked through the city, I passed Lark and Winslow's new headquarters, sleeker, shinier, built to erase the memory of the old scandals. For a moment, I stood there, watching the employees hurry inside under the glow of the lobby lights. Somewhere in there, another Marcus was probably fighting his own battle. Maybe he'd win. Maybe he wouldn't. But I knew one thing. If they chose the wrong person again, there'd be another reckoning. Because I'd lit the match. And fire has a way of spreading. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.